Hi ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to Ancient Epics, the place where the greatest stories of humanity come back to life. Imagine a time when the most dangerous criminal in all Europe was not a warlord, not a heretic, not even a human king, but a single red fox who stood accused of rape, murder, robbery, blasphemy, and treason, yet walked free from the royal court 3 times, each time richer and more powerful than before, while the noblest beasts of the realm lay broken and humiliated in the dust. This is no mere children's fable. This is Reynard the Fox, the medieval beast epic that terrified priests, delighted peasants, and was formally condemned by popes and emperors alike for 1,000 years because it revealed, with merciless clarity, how the world truly works when cunning wears the mask of innocence and power mistakes flattery for wisdom. Hidden beneath talking animals lies one of the darkest mirrors ever held up to human society, a mirror forged in the fires of the 12th and 13th centuries, when Europe was rebuilding itself from the ruins of the Dark Ages and discovering, to its horror, that the new cathedrals of law and faith were already cracking under the weight of hypocrisy. Long before Disneyland ever dreamed of a smiling cartoon fox, the forests of northern France, Flanders, and the Rhineland echoed with the name Renart, spelled sometimes with a T, sometimes without, yet always spoken with a mixture of fear and admiration. The earliest written traces appear around the year 1170 in the rolling green countryside near the old Roman city of Tournai, where a Flemish cleric named Pierre de Saint Cloud first gathered the scattered oral tales into a coherent branch known as Roman de Renart. Fragments of the story, however, are far older. Archaeologists digging beneath the flagstones of Cologne Cathedral have uncovered carved ivory gaming pieces from the 11th century showing a fox in bishop's robes preaching to a flock of geese, proof that the character was already famous long before any manuscript survived. By the time the great branches were composed between 1174 and 1250, the cycle had swollen to more than 30,000 verses in Old French alone, with parallel versions sprouting in Middle Dutch as Van den was Reynard, in Latin as Renardus Vulpes, and in German as Reinhard Fuchs. Copies were illuminated with breathtaking miniatures, gold leaf glinting on the fox's red fur while the Lion King sat upon a throne carved in the Romanesque style still visible today. In the cathedrals of Chartres and Reims, the story opens in the pleasant month of May, when the meadows around the royal castle are carpeted with clover and the lark ascends toward the pale northern sun. Noble the lion, king of all beasts, has called his court to the ancient stronghold that scholars now identify with the rocky outcrop of Mont Saint-Michel in Normandy, though in the tale it is simply the king's palace among the lime trees. Every creature attends. The bear Bruin, heavy as the brown granite of the Vosges mountains. Isengrin the wolf, lean and gray as the slate roofs of Liege. Tibert the cat, whose eyes shine like the polished jet mine near Whitby. Grimbert the badger, cousin to Reynard, whose burrow tunnels resemble the underground galleries of the silver mines at Goslar, and countless others, stags, boars, hares, rabbits, roosters, hens, all gathered beneath a sky where the constellation Leo climbs toward its summer zenith. Yet one seat remains empty. Reynard the Fox has not appeared, though summoned thrice. The air grows heavy with accusation. Isengrin the wolf steps forward first, his voice rough as winter wind across the Ardennes. He tells how Reynard violated his wife Hyacinthe in the dark of the forest, how he stole the fat sausages Isengrin had hidden in an oak hollow, how he lured the wolf into a farmer's well so that the peasants beat him nearly to death with flails made of ash wood. Then Chanticleer the rooster recounts the terrible massacre of his children, how Reynard, disguised as a wandering monk in a gray habit, persuaded the hens to leave the safety of the yard, only to seize Koppen the hen and devour her while her feathers drifted like snow across the Flemish fields. Complaint follows complaint until the court rings with righteous anger. Noble the lion, whose golden mane recalls the gilded reliquaries of Maastricht, roars that Reynard must answer or be declared outlaw throughout the realm. The king dispatches Bruin the bear as first messenger. Bruin lumbers through the ancient forest of Brosliand, where mist still clings to the moss-covered dolmens, until he reaches Malpertuis, Reynard's castle. Malpertuis is no ordinary den. Medieval listeners knew it as a real hill fort near the village of Lierns in High Note, its multiple entrances and winding passages mirroring the Iron Age oppida excavated across Belgium. The fox greets the bear with honeyed words, lamenting that he dares not travel to court while fasting for his sins. Yet, he whispers, the finest honey in the kingdom lies just beyond, in the hollow trunk of a tree felled by last winter's storm. Bruin, whose love of sweetness is legendary, presses his great head into the wedge-split oak, only to have the farmer Lambert and his men slam the iron wedges tight. The bear roars in agony as the villagers' rain blows upon him with axes forged from the bog iron of the Campine. Skin torn and dignity lost, Bruin barely escapes with his life, leaving patches of brown fur clinging to the bark like offerings to some cruel forest god. Humiliated, the bear returns to court. The queen, a gentle lioness whose grace recalls the marble statues of Provence, urges mercy, but the king's fury deepens. Next, he sends Tibert the cat, sleek and silent as midnight on the rooftops of Bruges. Reynard receives him with false courtesy beneath a moon that hangs low over the polders, promising a feast of mice in the priest's barn. Tibert, whose night vision rivals the owls of the ancient yew groves, leaps joyfully onto the rafters, only to trigger the snare set by the priest's son. The noose tightens, bells ring across the sleeping village, and the priest himself rushes out brandishing a torch of pine resin. Tibert fights like a demon, raking the priest's face until blood runs into his beard, yet escapes missing one eye and half an ear. When he limps back to court, the laughter of the smaller animals is drowned by the growls of outrage. Now only one messenger remains who might succeed where strength and agility failed. Grimbert the badger, Reynard's own nephew, whose black and white mask makes him appear as a humble pilgrim. Grimbert finds his uncle trembling in the deepest chamber of Malpertuis, surrounded by his wife Hermeline and their 3 cubs, Rovel, Persehai, and Malebranche, names that echo like distant church bells. Reynard weeps crocodile tears, claiming repentance. He dons the rough wool tunic of a penitent, shaves a tonsure into his red fur, takes up staff and scrip, and declares he will journey to Rome and beyond to the Holy Land to seek absolution. Yet as they walk together toward the court, he privately confesses every crime to Grimbert, forcing the badger to grant him absolution on the spot, an outrageous parody of the sacrament that sent shudders through medieval clergy who heard the tale recited in taverns. When at last Reynard stands before King Noble, the entire court expects immediate execution. The gallows of oak and hemp already rise on the meadow. Yet the fox falls to his knees, his voice soft as the evening wind across the dunes of Zealand. He confesses everything, and more. He speaks of a vast conspiracy against the lion's crown, of buried treasure hidden beneath the roots of an ancient elm near the springs of Kraka, treasure that could fund a new crusade. He names Isengrin as chief traitor, claims the wolf once boasted he would wear the crown himself. With every sentence the mood shifts. The lion's eyes gleam with greed. The queen's gentle heart is moved by the fox's apparent repentance. Reynard presents the king with a magical comb made, he says, from the ivory of a unicorn and inlaid with panther bone that smells sweet to the good, yet foul to the wicked. An object echoing the real medieval reliquaries that mixed walrus tusk and exotic resins. Noble sniffs, smiles, and pardons the fox on the spot. The reversal is complete. Reynard is appointed chancellor and chief counselor. He rides upon the king's own saddle, while Isengrin and Hersent are sentenced to public humiliation. The wolf is forced to become a monk, his tail shaved, his paws bound with the very rope meant for Reynard's neck. Hyacinthe is paraded through the court wearing the bridle of shame. As the sun sets behind the limestone cliffs that still tower above the Meuse, Reynard whispers one final lie into the king's ear, promising that the treasure lies across the sea and that only a crusade led by Noble himself can claim it. The lion roars approval, the court cheers, and the fox slips away into the twilight, his red brush vanishing among the hazel thickets like a flame returning to the hearth that birthed it. Centuries later, scholars poring over the yellowed vellum in the libraries of Douay and Wolfenbüttel would argue over the meaning. Some saw in Reynard the spirit of the rising merchant class, clever and ruthless, outwitting the old feudal lords. Others saw the devil himself, tempting the church and state into destruction through smooth words. Jacob Grimm, standing beneath the linden trees of Göttingen, declared the tale the greatest comic epic of the Middle Ages. Goethe, walking the banks of the Ilm in Weimar, began a grand poem he never finished, haunted by the fox's amber eyes. Even today, if you visit the quiet village of Hulst near the Dutch border, the townspeople will show you the stone statue of Reynard erected in 1985. Still smirking as if he knows the treasure was never real, and that the greatest trick was convincing the world that cunning deserves a throne. Yet perhaps the deepest truth lies in the silence that follows the laughter. For when the fire dies down and the last listener departs into the night, the forest remembers that every kingdom built on flattery carries within it the seed of its own ruin, and that the red fox still walks the moonlit paths of Europe, unchanged since the days when Charlemagne's empire crumbled and new walls rose against the darkness. If these ancient voices touched your heart today, please consider subscribing to Ancient Epics and ringing the bell so you never miss the next forgotten tale. Thank you for watching.